All right, I'm Jack Donovan, and you are listening to or watching Pater, PH2T3R, the Journal of Solar Culture, a show that will probably never be sponsored by the delicious pineapple pick-me-up of Monster Energy Ultra Gold. But
they're lost.
I'm here, of course, with, as always, with my co-host, C.B. Robertson, author of many fine books. You can find them in the show notes. And today we're going to talk about the Oresteia. And if you've never read it, that's going to sound boring because I never, to be honest, I never thought that I would enjoy a Greek tragedy as much as I enjoyed this, especially, and I put it in the show notes below, the BBC performance of it that a lot of us listened to, and then you can also listen to it on Audible, was absolutely fantastic. It was like listening to a movie. And, I was listening to it on the elliptical at the gym, doing some cardio. And the whole time I'm like, oh, damn. It's really engaging. And for something that's like 2,500 years old, it's very engaging and very, very relevant and interesting. And we talked about it for the last 3 weeks in the Order of Fire. The whole group read it together, and we did some group discussions about it. So we thought that we'd pull it all together here for our wider audience, the greater mandala of the Order of Fire, and talk about it a little bit. But before I do that, I want to just briefly talk about the intro there. This is my trip to Athens this past year. Was one of the biggest paybacks of a vacation that I've ever taken, as far as and reading this play was really cool because I'm like, oh, I've been to the spot where they're saying that scene happens. There's a spot where it happens in the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Orestes is draping himself over the omphalos, which is the World Naval Stone. They have the one that they think they had at the World Naval Stone in the museum downstairs that I've seen. So my mental picture of this, they in the BBC thing, they have Apollo walking out of the mountain, looking at the mountains over Delphi, and I don't think it says that in the original play, but I'm like, I know what those mountains look like. And then the rest of it takes place. This world, I'm talking specifically about the third play, because obviously I haven't been to Argos or wherever Agamemnon's house was supposed to be. But it also takes place. They goes to the temple of Athena, presumably at on the Acropolis, and hangs himself over a statue. And that statue was supposed to be in the Erechtheion. And so I had footage of that in our opening footage. And then at the very last clip that I put in there is the Theater of Dionysus on the Acropolis, which is where this was probably performed. So really cool. For me personally, it was a really cool thing. And just, to be able to share that with you guys a little bit, that this, 2,500 years old, it's like, oh, well, these spots are still there, the places that they're talking about, which is pretty amazing. So anyway, do you have any thoughts you want to open up with, or should I summarize it, or should you summarize it? One of us could be either.
Summarize it? I just want to say it. I had a very similar experience the first time I read my introduction to the Oresteia. I'd never really heard of it before. I think I heard some passing references to it in Nietzsche, but I didn't really know what he was referring to. It was in going through Greg Nage's excellent book on the Greek hero that he spends 2 whole chapters on the Oresteia, talking about the relationship between these particular Greek words and the concept of heroism in Greek, and which led me to investigate this book, which the first time I heard of and understood what was being described was it was a commentator talking about the Monty Python crew, of all people. And it was they were talking about how all the Monty Python actors were classically educated. Like they grew up reading Aeschylus. And I had no idea who Aeschylus was. I was like, reading Aeschylus? What's that? And then, some years later, I get this Greg Nage introduction, and you feel like you're discovering this Shakespeare that no one has read before.
Right.
And it's like everyone knows Shakespeare, everyone knows Macbeth, everyone knows Romeo and Juliet, everyone knows Julius Caesar. No one knows the Oresteia. No one knows Prometheus Bound. No one knows Eumenides or the Libation Bearers, and they should. They absolutely should know. it's such an excellent. And I was reading a little bit of Agamemnon with my wife like 3 or 4 months ago, and we were both struck again by how like psychologically easily understood and like how clear what is not said comes through in the story. It's such a perfect use of dramatic irony, especially in those opening few sections with the Watchmen. But why don't you give a summary of the story for the audience here?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I have us on the wrong setting here. There we go. That's how we normally do it. But okay, so I'll give the basic summary. Obviously, to get all the detail, you have to read the book. But there are 3 plays to the Oresteia, and so it's Agamemnon and the Libation Bearers and the Eumenides. And the setup is that basically Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, is waiting around, and we find out more about her later, but she's waiting for Agamemnon to come home from the Trojan War. And I joked that this whole series is basically fan fiction. It's Homeric, set in the Homeric universe. Basically, it's all things that happen after the Trojan War. And so Agamemnon comes home, and we're introduced to Cassandra, who's an interesting character really quickly. He's a prisoner that he brings with him, a slave, and she foretells what's going to happen. But of course, her curse is that no one's ever supposed to believe her, because Apollo made moves on her, and she was like, no. And so he's like, no one's going to believe you. It's a passage that it's only in Aeschylus that we get this story, I think. But it kind of makes Apollo look like a rich frat boy. Like, come on, baby, I'll give you the power of prophecy. As we said, I could make a second career of doing bro versions of ancient things and mythology. But
as an aside, have you heard the Gen Z translation of the Iliad?
No, I have not.
It is. I hate how accurate it is. It is like linguistic poison, but it's not. It tortures me to say that it's not the worst.
You're like, it's not wrong.
It is awful, but
yeah.
Anyways,
cool. Well, I'm sure they'd be horrified by my versions too. But anyway, so he goes anyway. Agamemnon, he comes home from the Trojan Wars, and he's greeted obviously as a hero. And we find out that Agamemnon, in order to go to the Trojan War, had to leave. He was being beset by storms and so forth. He did sacrifice his younger daughter, which has some great Game of Thrones, a Lord of Light references to it, which is kind of amusing. So Clytemnestra is a little bit, she's still mad about that because it was her daughter. It's just a little mad. So anyway, he goes into his house, and there's this great scene that really humanizes him, where there's a red carpet laid out for him. And I've wondered what the cultural reference of this is. Like, is this where we get red carpet from? Because it's pretty early. It's 2,500 years ago. So red carpet is laid out for him, and he doesn't want to walk on the red carpet because he's not a god. And he felt like he should walk on the ground like a man, which I thought was a very humanizing thing, because in the Iliad, Agamemnon was kind of a dick. But it's a humanizing thing that he doesn't want to show hubris. And, and so he goes inside, and his wife then murders him. And she wraps him up in like silk things and whatever, and then murders him. And we find out that she's actually been plotting. There's this long plot that between two families. Can you summarize that? You know that one better than I do.
Yeah. So it goes back. The curse of the House of Atreus is this thing that's been hanging over their house for generations. And it goes back all the way to Tantalus, the character we see depicted in the underworld who's stuck under a fruit tree. And every time he stoops to get some water, the water recedes from his grasp. And every time he reaches up to grab a fruit from the tree, the branches recede from his reach. So it's this like torture by proximity but unreachability that gives us the word tantalizing. Tantalus's fault had been he had tried to test the gods' omniscience by killing his own son and attempting to feed it to the gods. Pelops was the son, and he cut Pelops up, and but the gods saw through the trick, and none of them ate of Tantalus's son, except for which one? The goddess who was still upset about her daughter being abducted. The grain goddess, whose name escapes me at the moment. But anyways, she ate part of his shoulder. What's that?
Demeter?
Yes, Demeter. So Hephaestus had to make a new shoulder for him, but the gods were very upset by this. And so they cast him into Tartarus, and they brought Pelops back to life with a new shoulder. And then Pelops was a pretty decent normal character. We have the Olympian Games in honor of him, in fact. But his son Atreus got into a dispute over the throne with his brother, whose name escapes me. And so Atreus tricks his brother into eating his own son. So it's like the cannibalism is just through and through this whole story. And so his brother, because he eats his own child, gets banished because, like, never mind the guy who tricked him and murdered his son. Eating human flesh is horrible, apparently. So, more bad than killing your nephew. But he gets sent away, ostracized. But he plots revenge, and his other son Aegisthus ends up being Clytemnestra's lover and conspirator. Not only is he Clytemnestra's lover, he's got his own personal reasons for vendetta against the House of Atreus. Atreus, of course, has two sons, Agamemnon and Menelaus, so they're sort of born into this horrible intrafamilial blood feud, and the Oresteia sort of picks up where that intrafamilial blood feud leaves off and continues it forward. Right.
So obviously that's basically where Agamemnon ends. I mean, that's where Agamemnon ends.
Right.
But so it goes on. The second play is the Libation Bearers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fantastic play in the sense that the entire thing is basically a ritual. It starts out, the libations basically have all these old women and Electra, which is Agamemnon's daughter, his remaining daughter, who is not dead. It starts, Orestes is his son who has been exiled. It was never really clear why he's exiled that I know of, but he was away. He wasn't away. He was gone. And so he had come back, and he's at his father's grave, and he's saying how he needs to avenge his father. And then the play really begins when the libation bearers, basically the household staff that is still loyal to Agamemnon, what are they going to do? They're slaves, right? So they're wailing and going out. And actually, Clytemnestra had told Electra to take offerings to her father, because that's what you're supposed to do, which is kind of, obviously she killed him, so that was, it's kind of sleazy, and they talk about that. But they're basically like lamenting and asking for vengeance to the spirit of Agamemnon and to the gods and so forth. They're asking for vengeance to happen. And so it's just very ritualized. The whole thing is just this vengeance ritual that they're like bringing this forward and like plotting it out. And then Orestes shows up he's been listening because he was there, and meets his sister who he hasn't seen in years. And they're like, this is going down. Basically, that they kind of plan out how they're going to take out their mother. And it's they obviously there's some plotting, and they have to take out Aegisthus as well, and then it's a powerful thing for a young man to kill his mother. And obviously it wasn't. He felt that he had to do it, that the gods demanded that he do it, and he felt that. But she begs him for her life as he's doing it, and that's got to be that's heavy. I'm going to kill you, Mom. And then like this kind of discussion that happens between the two of them is it's just a very heavy moment, obviously, and he kills her anyway. But obviously that's a moment. So the play more or less ends there. I think the Libation Bearers more or less ends there. Did something else happen there? But I think they might go out. I feel like the ladies go out again. No. I think the Furies show up right then at the end.
There's a few like I hate to invoke this character, but there are a few Freudian elements here that are kind of interesting.
Uh-huh.
People might have heard of the electric complex without really knowing where that word comes from.
Right.
It of course comes from Libation Bearers, which just goes to show how much a familiarity with the classics can unlock even in contemporary culture.
Absolutely.
But there's also something very interesting going on between Orestes and his mother at a like developmental level for a man. And you see this in a much gentler manner in the Odyssey, where Telemachus, as he is becoming a man, begins to rebuke his mother and make his own decisions. There's like Jordan Peterson would probably describe this better than I could, but there's like a necessary separation between a son and the mother in the process of becoming a man. And killing your mother is maybe an extreme way of depicting that, but it is in a very brutal, as you put it in some of our discussions, a very black metal kind of way. It is a kind of depiction. It is a kind of coming of age story of this man, a young man, taking on man's responsibility, taking on the mantle of becoming the head of the household. It is almost Simba coming home and getting rid of Scar, because he gets rid of Aegisthus as well. Although we're to imagine Simba's mother was not the faithful wife that she was no Penelope, we'll say. So there are some interesting parallels there in both the becoming a man by separating from the mother,
right?
However brutally depicted that might be.
Yeah, that's cutting the cord right there in the biggest way, and that is a huge theme just generally. I think that maybe gets underplayed by some. They're like men's groups and so forth. That it gets softened a lot, and in the kind of Iron John wing of men's things, it gets that gets softened and so forth. But I think that there's a part where you have to go over to your father, and that your father is actually the guy. In any normal patriarchal society, it eventually becomes like, oh no, Mom, okay, that's your mom, but to be a man, I have to go to my father,
right?
And that's usually the big part of the whole process.
And to do that in spite of the imperfections of your father, because no father is perfect.
Yeah, well, you figure that out later. But no, but I mean, that happened in my family too. I mean, up until recently, but we'll get into that. But that happened in my family too. I mean, I was into art. My mom was into art. I was very close with my mother growing up. But as you get to a point where, okay, I'm a man. Now I'm talking about jobs. I want to talk about which car should I buy, and all the stuff that I have to talk to my father about. And look, over the years, it was me and my dad. We became buddies.
Yeah.
And obviously we had more to talk about because we're both men and we deal with the same problems in the same world in the same way. So I mean, I think that's a very normal part of the whole process.
Yeah. Well, and it is worth mentioning, however screwed up anyone's father might be, it would be hard to find a father that's more messed up than Agamemnon. It is very, very few people have fathers that literally sacrificed their sister on an altar, in your infancy. That's a rarity these days.
Yeah. One could say. I mean, you can probably go down the rabbit hole of serial killers and find another crazier dad. But I think that's
you have to get into politics to find those kinds of families.
Yes. But yes. So it's obviously that there's a lot to say about mothers and sons and so forth in this play, and then basically what happens at the end of this is that the Eumenides or the Furies show up, and they are
not Eumenides yet.
Not Eumenides yet. I wasn't clear on that when I was reading it, but you've made that clear. Like basically, they're the Furies, and then they become the Eumenides.
The Greek word for Furies is Erinnyes, which is spelled kind of weird. It's Erinyes, so it looks like Erinnyes, but it's the Y and the U in Greek are sort of weird together. But they're the Furies, and they're these dark, ugly, ancient old women. Older than the gods, arguably, and they're basically gods of vengeance. And I think there is a sense in the ritualistic nature of the Libation Bearers that justice and vengeance are identical. There's not a distinction between justice and vengeance as we make that distinction today. So it was actually funny. I discovered over the course of a little bit of editing yesterday an article from Psychology Today called "Don't Confuse Revenge with Justice," and it talks about 5 key differences between the two. And it's like, this is just a watered down version of ancient Greek stuff, like working its way, probably without the author's even awareness of what they're doing, into contemporary science, we'll say, or at least psychological opinion.
Right.
But it all goes back to these stories.
Yeah, and a side note, and we'll get obviously the end of this discussion about justice and revenge is where we'll end, because that's like the whole point of this whole play. Right. But an aside, just so we don't miss this little tidbit, live by the sword, die by the sword is also a quote that comes directly from this play.
Yeah, people think it comes from the Bible. So much of the Bible is derivative from this Greek stuff too.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was an interesting addition to see in there. But so the third play, the Eumenides, these Furies have shown up, and Orestes, who has killed his mother, is tormented by them because they want vengeance because he killed his mother. And so he basically flees, and we find out that, I think we find out then, I don't think we find that out before that, but we find out then that Apollo actually told him to kill his mother. And so he flees to Apollo's his sanctuary in the temple at Delphi, which we had pictures of at the beginning of the show, and the stone that's the navel of the world there, and he's there, and he's kind of covered in blood and has he's surrounded by these nasty creatures, and
almost sounds like an Edgar Allan Poe poem.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and
Telltale Heart sort of.
Yeah. We get, this is where Apollo actually shows up, and so we get a really good characterization of Apollo here. He shows up and Orestes is asking for help, and Apollo is answering him and saying basically, you did the right thing, and then tells him what to do. He basically has the Furies in like a sleep trance, basically. Like he was like, freeze, and he has a discussion with Orestes, and then he tells Orestes, like, to resolve this, you're going to have to, because they're going to chase you for the rest of your life, and they're like these crazy undead things that are like older than the gods, and so to resolve this, you're going to have to go to Athens and go to the temple of Athena there. And it's very convenient that it's Athena because it's the Athenians, and this politically plays into the whole thing. But so he goes, and he's supposed to go and go before Athena, and she's going to figure it out. They're basically, he tells her like there's going to be a trial, and they're going to determine it. But don't worry, dude, I got you. Like he's like, I speak for Zeus. My dad's a big deal. Again, it kind of like when you see Apollo in this way, like you have like, okay, he's Zeus's son. That's why he has his power of prophecy. He speaks for dad. And so like whatever he says is probably going to be right. It's going to come to pass. And so he sends Orestes to go there, and he runs there. And at some point, I think he gets purified in some way by like pig's blood or something like that. But it's just in there somewhere. Then after Apollo leaves, I think he yells at the Furies a little bit. And then after he leaves, then the Furies they're free to go, and so they go. Then they race to chase Orestes, and to torment him some more. And they're mad, and it's acted out really well. You get the really sense that they're absolutely horrific creatures in the BBC version. So they all arrive at. Well, Orestes beats them, obviously, and he gets to the statue of Athena, and he's crying. He's on the statue asking Athena for help, and the Orestes, the Furies come around, and then Athena wakes up being, I'm Athena, and what she basically does, and you can add information here if you feel necessary. What she basically does is she sets up a trial by jury, and it is basically the mythical first trial by jury, in which she gets the Athenian citizens to come in and weigh in on whether or not Orestes should be killed and go to the underworld and face his torments there, or whether or not he should go free and the Fury should fuck off. And so they have a trial and arguments, and Apollo comes out and argues again for Orestes, and then they ask Orestes what his take on it is and why he did what he did. And what's really cool about Apollo's argument, well, I won't say really cool, but it gives one a chuckle, is that part of his argument is that it's one thing to kill your mother and it's another thing to kill your father. And basically, his argument is that the mother is not the true parent of the child. It is the one who mounts her and puts the seed in her that starts life. And therefore, this is he's
such a frat boy.
Patriarchy. He's the father who creates life. She nurtures it like a seedling, whatever. But she is not the true parent of the child, so it's not the same. And also, the gods bless marriage. So she's killed her husband that she was married to, which is one strike in the God's book. And then she's like fathers are more important than mothers. So therefore, that's another strike. As far as this is Apollo's argument in the play. So I thought that was, like I said, it gives one a chuckle. I don't know that we'd have to assert that that's truth, but that is, amusing. But it's kind of the opposite of the way modern Western courts handle parenthood. but like, oh no, it's really the mother's child and the father is just this sperm donor. So it's an interesting turnaround and interesting to read for that reason there. But so they go through this trial, and the Furies obviously have many words to say about why this is bullshit. And these are the old laws, and the old laws of vengeance have to be respected. And what are you going to do for us? Why is, this isn't okay? And so basically they say, have all parties said what they have to say? And they say yes. And then they collect lots from the Athenian jurors. And Athena says she's going to be the tiebreaker, basically, because there's an equal number of them. Well, there's a number of them. I guess an even number.
12, yeah.
Okay, it's 12. Oh yeah, that's right. We talked about that because it's the same number that they use today.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, and we talked about the significance of the number 12 a little bit. And so she, she's going to vote. She puts in her vote, but that's going to be the tiebreaker basically for the other side. So they collect the votes, and they're even. The Athenians are split on this, but Athena breaks the tie, and therefore Orestes gets to go free, and the Furies are real mad about it. They're not accepting this verdict at all. They're real mad about it, but she comes up with a solution, basically that the Athenians are going to have to honor.
She being Athena.
Athena, yes.
Yes.
He comes with this solution that the Athenians are going to have to argue. They're going to have to honor the Furies as treat them, and give them their due in the city and make offerings to them and so forth.
Yeah.
And that's, I believe, when you say they transfer into they become the Eumenides then.
Right. They're welcome and in fact given a special place of honor in this city, but they have to leave like Roman armies. They have to leave their weapons at the gates. Right. Then when they come into the city, they'll be Eumenides, which literally translated means like those of good intentions. You meaning good, and Menides is like a conjugation of mind or something like that. Those of good intentions. And so the effect is the transformation of justice from vengeance into a certain affect, a certain kind of way of being that is encapsulated in having good intentions, which is, of course, the name of the play.
Yeah. And so what this has really done, and which is why I think it's especially relevant to what we're talking about in the Order of Fire, is that these are performed as a play, I think 3 years in a row. I don't think it was all in the same thing.
That sounds right.
Yeah, I think it was 3 years in a row. It doesn't really matter, but it was performed, and by Aeschylus, who's obviously like a star playwright, and he performs it under the Acropolis, presumably at the Theater of Dionysus. And what he's really doing is that there was a conflict in the city before that between the old guard that was more oligarchs, aristocrats, so forth, and the more democratically oriented Athenians that we hear more about. And there was a civil war between them, or a conflict. And he's basically setting up a mythical reason to unify the city. And Athena even gives a speech about there will be no more civil wars. Like she gives a speech about let the people of Athens never fight again amongst each other, but let them go and conquer others. I mean, she still has it. Yeah. She's going to be a conquering goddess, but let them go conquer others, but let them have peace at home.
Yeah.
And so what they're doing is using myth as propaganda, especially imagine if they did this now. They're using this myth. I mean, they do, but in a different way. But they're using this myth to basically establish the legitimacy of the new government in Athens, and also the jury trial. It's like
the Broadway show Hamilton, or the movie Lincoln, in many ways.
Dios mio. That is a good example. But in terms of historical myth, but I mean, you imagine using
Aeschylus did it better.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you were operating from a Christian context, imagine, someone writes a new play where actually we added a new episode to the Bible in which he authorizes our political party. People would lose their mind
by means of golden tablets discovered on another continent, or what? What are we talking about?
Yes, yeah, saying, but Who knows? Maybe that's the way. That's funny. But yeah. So the idea of having these people rewriting, speaking for the gods in the play, and that just shows how different their idea of like piety and the gods and so forth, that the gods could be characters in somebody's play and he could put words in their mouth,
right?
And the political words, and we joked about this in our meetings, that it's like imagine the American Civil War. Imagine the people on the people who are on the side of the South sitting in the same auditorium watching this play, like the oligarchs being like, yeah, yeah, nice play. Like they'd be so pissed off about it. But
there is something sort of beautiful in the way it goes about it, because it's not like we won, they lost, and screw those guys. It's like we won, so in order to maintain this victory and maintain peace, we're going to give a special place of honor to the losing side. We're actually going to venerate them as heroes as much as our side. And the way this played out in Athens, if my historical recollection is correct, was that the judges of Athens actually made it a crime to even mention that certain people, certain Athenian citizens, had been on the wrong side of that conflict. It was legally enforced amnesia. It was the maybe, I can't check this offhand, but maybe the first instance of having something stricken from your record. And like in modern, political hypothetical conversation, political philosopher Curtis Yarvin had said the way you would take down the deep state is not like what a lot of these like hardcore people on the right is like, oh, line them up against the wall or whatever. He's like, no. What you do is you give them all awards and you give them large pensions and you thank them for their service, even if you hate everything they did. And you say, thank you. You've done your work. You can rest now. And you retire them with honor. And that's how you truly bring it to a close. Because one of the big themes it seems to me, in the Oresteia, juxtaposed with something like the Odyssey, is this idea of pollution. This is something Greg Nodge talks about a lot, and pollution and purification. When Odysseus gets home to Ithaca, one of the first things he does is he takes a bath after they've killed all the suitors and done all this stuff. And he's discovered by Eurycleia, his old nurse, because she notices the scar on his leg while he's taking a bath. And he's like, shh, be freaking quiet about it. But like the bath is being washed is a symbol of being cleansed of pollution. And there's something symbolically important and interesting about Agamemnon being killed in the bath, having the net thrown over him and stabbed to death in the bath. It almost seems to imply, Agamemnon, in killing Iphigenia at the outset, right before he even left for Troy, spent all those 10 years with this stain of pollution on him. And we had a conversation, I think mostly Ed and I, last year, about the nature of sin. Is it about missing the mark, or is it about pollution? And etymologically, it was much more about missing the mark. But the priestly caste seemed to make it about, pollution and uncleanliness, and you have to cleanse yourself. And all of religion seems to become past a certain point of, crossing that very fuzzy threshold between religiosity and obsessive compulsive disorder, becomes about just cleanliness and cleansing oneself. But we see in these ancient stories a kind of uncleanliness and pollution that isn't just OCD, that is something real and that is something felt by all of society around you. And what's the proper cleansing ritual? Well, not what Agamemnon did, apparently Odysseus did it a little bit better. And Greg Nosh spends most of his time talking about another hero on the subject of pollution and cleanliness. But I think Orestes in Eumenides gives one possibility. It looks like a trial, which doesn't strike us as particularly religious today until you see the mythical foundation of it here. But it is a kind of cleansing ritual, at least if you are, found not guilty. And it has that binding effect because it is the right ritual. If my recollection is correct, so much of the Libation Bearers is Electra asking, what is the right process? I've not done this before. How do I say the right things and give the right offerings to do this ritual correctly? Mm-hmm. And an understanding of correct ritual sounds very, very esoteric, sounds like some online schizo posting by some, strange nerd online, until you see it play out in a classic story that you're like, that's the foundation for what we all do today, right now. And so it emphasizes the relationship between, pollution, correct ritual, and reintegration in society proper.
Now, in England, do they still wear the wigs?
I don't know. I hope
they
so.
did until very recently.
So.
If they stopped. If they stopped, they only stopped recently because I don't know either way. But
I'd be really sad if they did.
Yeah, but I mean, look at the ritual of that. In order to dispense justice, we have to put on funny outfits because they're the traditional outfits that come with dispensing justice. And we have to wear wigs, even though nowhere in society wears wigs anymore. But we are like carrying forward the tradition of the ancestors by wearing powdered wigs.
Our judges still wear robes.
Who
else wears robes?
The magic thing is the gavel.
The gavel, yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's a magical thing. Once that it isn't over until he does the thing.
Yeah, it's like a Buddhist monk ringing the bell.
Yeah. It's the hammer coming. The hammer of justice coming down. But it's a very. I mean, all that is ritual, and there is a certain way that you're allowed to talk and so forth in court, and there's a procedure as to how everything has to be done. Obviously, thing's a little more crazy now, but it's extremely ritualistic.
You were mentioning British law and politicians. One of my favorite little micro rituals in British parliamentary debate. They say such vicious things about each other, and it's always funny. Like, British politicians have this just brutal sense of humor when they're lambasting their opponents. It's wonderful. But before they do that, especially when it's the side in power criticizing the sort of the side that's not in power, it begins with them saying, describing the loyal opposition, and that they have to talk in that way. And it's this ritualistic reminder that however much I hate this person, and I'm going to mock them, and I'm going to belittle them, and I'm going to make fun of all their ideas and everything they have to say, and their intelligence and their sex life and everything, we're still on the same side. The loyal opposition is the iron sharpening the iron of our system, and we are, at the end of the day, still trying to work together. And that little ritualistic reminder is a key little linguistic ritual in that system of British politics that sort of is spiritually derivative, it seems, from the spirit of Athena and the Oresteia that we see here.
Someone in the chat was like, it isn't over until he does the thing, Jack Donovan.
It's like
I don't quote quite as well in real life as I do in writing.
It's like Rocky, but not subtly.
Yeah.
This thing ain't over until he hits the thing with the thing. Yeah.
It's the thing. But yeah, one could say that Athena was a uniter, not a divider. Like that's as bringing back to kind of what she was doing and the whole purpose of the thing and what you were saying, like bringing all these people together. And I think obviously we're in a place in America where I think that's almost over, where we're not doing that anymore. They still make like genuflections to it, like in the sense of like my friends on the other side of the aisle, and they say things like that, which are similar on the other side of the aisle, but we were all the same thing, But
to your point from earlier, you have to wonder how much eye rolling there was in the play back then when they made these overtures. So how much of this was the play being nice, and how much did that correspond to what was actually happening in the in the hill of Ares, the Areopagus, and the courts of Athens at that time.
Right, and yeah, I think it's this ongoing theme that we've had in this show and our discussions, and it is like the nature of magic, and how much it we really see how much of this is actually essentially magic, and they're using art here to do magic, which is another level of the thing.
And a lot of the power of that art is drawing from the sacral weight of Homer, because we see Athena do the same thing at the end of the Odyssey. Like Odysseus and Telemachus have just killed all these suitors, which are like respected men in Ithaca, in that society, and so their families are not happy about that. And so a bunch of the families of the suitors are coming to confront Odysseus and Telemachus and Laertes, and they're going to have a fight about it. And Laertes has, in fact, this old man who's just become revived by finding his son has returned and is not dead after all. He was this shell of a man, and now he's like, oh, I'm strong and vigorous again. And he before Athena arrives, he's actually already thrown a spear through the forehead of one of the suitors' fathers. But right after that, and they're about to clash, Athena appears like the Deus ex machina of tragedy, maybe the first one, and says, "Stop, everybody, stop! We're not going to do civil wars." And it's actually very much like the Oresteia, although it's a little bit more ham-fisted. And of course, Homer is like the Bible to these Greek people. So if you can draw references from Homer, it carries the weight of Homer into your message. And many of the messages in Aeschylus, not only is it picking up the story from where Homer left off, because it's the end of the Trojan War, and it's a story of return, of nostos, just like the Odyssey was. Not so happy of a return in Agamemnon's case. It's picking up some of those themes too. And I mean, even the idea of the blood feud is there in the Iliad. We see, there's a bit of a feud that starts the whole war, of course, but we see this incredible depiction of a blood feud on the shield of Achilles, which is this, Homer is famous for going on these poetical digressions. Like he'll be describing some conflict and then some guy gets stabbed, and then he'll spend like 6 lines describing the guy who got stabbed. And he was a farmer in this town, and he had just been married, but he didn't have the money to pay for his dowry, so he went to war. And he was famous for making these wonderful works of metal, and now the people will never know his wonderful metalworking again, and his wife will never know the pleasure of her lover's bed again, and she'll mourn forever. And you're like, Jesus Christ. But he spends 129 lines describing the shield that Hephaestus crafts for Achilles. And on this shield is a depiction of 2 cities. And in one of the cities, there is a dispute between 2 men who are arguing over the blood price of a man who's been slain. and they take this. A crowd has gathered, and they're taking both sides, and so the heralds are keeping everyone back, and they've taken it to a jury of elders, and there's 2 talents of gold on the ground to whichever of the jurors can give the best verdict, can come up with the best solution to this problem, where one guy offers to pay in full and the other guy refuses to accept any money. And there's no resolution there. It's not really a prescription. It's just kind of a depiction. But you can see how Aeschylus picked up on this, the most poetically elaborated, item in the entire story of the Iliad, and creates an entire theme out of this, and distills a mythical prescription from this poetical description. And so in a world that venerates Homer, you can begin to feel how weighty Aeschylus's story is, which is excellent writing, in addition to all of this mythical dovetailing on Homer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really, like I said, obviously we've ruined the story, but I feel like with really old things, it doesn't matter. It's not about that. It's not about, oh my God, what's going to happen.
Right.
I think that if you haven't read this at all, or if you haven't read the Oresteia at all, or at least listen to it, like I said, it is entertaining to listen to. If you have to kill some time, it's way more entertaining than most audiobooks I've ever listened to. So it's a great performance, and it's really captures the imagination. So I really recommend that for anybody who's watching along, and thank you guys, you guys who are listening in. We have a lot of people who listen tomorrow when I put it up to Spotify. They listen to this as a podcast, and then I see views accumulate like over the week, and a lot of people watch this later. But thank you guys, any of you guys who are jumping in and in the chat, or in just watching along. It's nice to have the live audience. That's part of the reason of doing it live, and also it makes we're stuck with the schedule. It's we can't be like, we won't do one this week. So it's keeping us regular in this, and it's interesting to see these themes continue throughout, like our discussions, and we've just come to certain conclusions, I think, and that's part of the project of the Order of Fire, is to look at all these things and figure out, rather than inheriting conclusions, is to figure out. Brian Pitcher. Hey, Brian. Brian's an awesome dude. He's actually a member of the Order of Fire too. We're trying to read these things and investigate these ideas and go through philosophy and so forth, and come to conclusions. And it's like slowly we are coming to some conclusions. And one of the ones that we keep coming back to is judgment over systems. As far as, and this is what you just said about this, finding the man who can come up with the best solution to resolve a problem. Those are the guys who you kind of actually want in charge of giving solutions, not systems or algorithms, but the guy who can look at these two dudes and say, okay, how do I satisfy you? And that's really what Athena does in this play, is how can we resolve this situation in a way that peacefully, in a way that is going to be satisfactory to everybody, and we don't have to have another 4 generations of people killing each other, and in this case, serving each other their children as dinner.
It is funny to see Apollo's personality in this story, because I won't plot spoil your essay on Apollo, but Apollo is a very justice oriented god. Is a very this is right, this is wrong, you should do this, you should not do this. And there is a sentiment that is very popular among young men in particular. I remember holding this extremely strongly. That is, I think, summarized by the old Latin phrase, fiat justitia ruat caelum, do justice though the skies may fall. And I mean, you see this even in like NIMBYist East Coast philosophers, like who's that? A theory of justice, John Rawls. So like, oh, justice is the necessary foundational principle of an ordered society. If you don't have justice, you don't have anything else. So we must do justice. You hear this nowadays as no justice, no peace, which comes across as a bit of a threat. But like if justice is truly identical with vengeance, then what you have is the blood feud, because the Furies represent nothing if not there are legitimate cases on both sides here. And what is just might be that everyone kills each other. And what Athena comes in representing is like the perspective of Athena is not held by a female god in the Iliad. It's held by old men. It's held by men like Nestor and Phoenix, who try to talk to these young men and say, hey, there's something more important than justice going on. And when you invoke justice, you are invoking forces far more powerful and terrible than you maybe recognize. The opening word of the Iliad is menace, which is this like this divine sanction against violation of the correct hierarchy. And the connotation is that it brings about indiscriminate collateral damage, you could say. It's not just the person at fault who gets punished, it's everybody around the person at fault that gets punished, and maybe beyond that too. And so the invocation of justice, menace was a taboo word. And the invocation of the Furies also, a blood feud doesn't just hurt whoever was wrong. It hurts their families, their extended families, their siblings, especially in, pastoral honor cultures where to get back at you for killing my brother, I won't kill you, I'll kill your sister, and you get the what's the word? Like proxy violence.
Right.
And there is the idea that there is something more important than justice is kind of an old world idea because of the transformation of justice, because justice has become about this affect instead of like an actual just deserts, an actual repayment of a debt or whatever. It was transformed into this into this kind of spirit, a having good intention. And but I think I don't remember if we talked about this on a previous podcast, but one wonders how complete that transformation was.
Right. Well, we talked about it. It is kind of magic, and if you let the magic words fall apart, then all the magic dies, and
Right.
that it's not as complete as we want it to be. We believe that justice is, and it just kind of starts to unravel. But anyway, we'll wrap up here in a second. But we wanted to. You gave a little hint at it. Is that we're putting on the finishing touches, aren't we? We're putting on the finishing touches of our last contributions, the two of us, to the Order of Fire's first book, and it's going to be called PH2T3R, the Journal of Soil Culture. It's volume 1, and it's a big collection of a lot of the essays that we've talked about, a lot of which have been published online. I wrote 2 new essays that are going to be in the book. Christopher wrote half a book. It's going to be in the book. This philosophical treatise that involves phenomenology and all kinds of things that I won't ruin for you. But it's actually the reason why we ended up reading these plays, because he invokes justice and this whole discussion as part of his coming to his conclusions in that essay. And that's why I was like, hey, we should read this, so I know what you're talking about better. Yeah. And then it became, as I said, much more exciting than we thought.
Turned out they're fun books to read for their own sake. They're
exactly.
Just great stories.
Yeah, exactly. And also it dovetails into what I was doing, and my essay that is going to come out in the book is about Apollo. And I was doing some research on Apollo and Dionysus because I was going to go write one essay, and as often happens with writing, it became something else. because my understanding of Apollo.
Because you learn things, yeah.
Yes, and so like this is a great example. Play is a great example of the way that Apollo is characterized in this versus the way that, say, like Nietzsche or Camille Paglia characterizes him, which is very, very different. Than this guy that is a little bit more like thumatic and a little bit more energized than this cold, rational creature that But anyway, so that's a little preview of what we have in that. We're going to be wrapping up the finishing touches on that and getting into press. Hopefully, I have to go through the revisions and seeing the final print, and that all takes time. But hopefully, it should be out by the end of February. A little late from what we had originally planned, but we were both world-class procrastinators. So but it should be out soon. It should be our first book, and so I'm excited about that. And I'm already thinking about having the guys start working on contributions for next year. So maybe we'll get it out a month earlier, like we were planning. But because this is now something that you could work really hard and put a published essay. We have poetry and so forth in this. We even have people don't know this. We talk about creating culture. We're not lying. We actually even have in this book solar wedding vows that have actually been used because someone had asked us. One of the members had asked us for wedding vows, and you and Paul Begadon, they collaborated on it. It's very short, but put together some solar idealist wedding vows, and they've actually been used in a ceremony as far as I know. So,
and don't we have a recipe in there as well?
We have a recipe for an examination of Sumerian beer, and also we have some things about ghee. We have a recipe, so I don't know if there's a recipe in that or not, but Ed wrote, a masterpiece on ghee. So we have that in there. So we have, a lot of things that are in there that people haven't seen before as well, and that the members of the Order of Fire have contributed. So membership's technically closed right now, although I haven't taken the button off, so you could, fire on it if you want to. But I haven't gotten to that yet. But membership's technically closed right now, but we will be open again in the future. And we really want the members of the Order of Fire to be the guys who are having interest in having these discussions and contributing to that. Now we have guys who just support us, who are in the members in the Order of Fire, and then guys who are like gun guys who just like what we're doing and want to listen to it. Then they do their own thing and they bring their own thing to the table. Or the guys who are into martial arts or other things, totally different. So we have a lot of interesting characters, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we can get going for next year as far as poetry and culture, because that's the whole idea. So anyway, I will wrap it up now. And thank you guys for watching along. Anybody who's still left, and if you did enjoy this, it definitely does help to hit like and subscribe. It's painful and cliche to say, but there it is. It does help. Yes, thank you, and obviously anything you can share online. If you have friends that are nerdy enough to get into the Oresteia with us, then you can share it to all your nerdy friends, and hopefully they'll enjoy it as well. But anyway, thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay solar.
Pater is the cult